Peace, Shalom, and Salam. I'm Ray Bibzak, a SWIFT board member, and I would like to welcome you to our online forum, Understanding Racial Competency. For those of you that may not be familiar with our organization, SWIFT is the Southwest Interfaith Team. It's an interfaith group of 19 congregations comprised of mosques, synagogues, and churches. We meet once a month and are co-chaired by a member of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths. Besides meeting to promote interfaith dialogue, SWIFT members plan for service projects such as volunteering to work with PADS, Habitat for Humanity, Respond Now, food depositories, and we also help to clean forest preserves. We also sponsor 2 interfaith dinners a year, which is good food and good conversation. And the end of the year, we also have an interfaith picnic. Now, the pandemic, as with most organizations, has curbed our usual projects. So we've had to readjust our project goals. Several weeks ago, SWIFT donated supplies and checks for $200 each to the South Suburban PADS, that's Public Action to Deliver Shelter, Respond Now in Chicago Heights, Illinois, Frankfurt Food Pantry in Frankfurt, Illinois, the Pantry of Rich Township in Richton Park, and the Mosque Cares in Hazel Crest, Illinois. As in a letter signed by our co-chairs to these organizations reflected, our hands are tied due to social distancing restrictions, but our hearts are full of compassion for our fellow neighbors who are struggling. We are blessed to be able to help in this minor fashion. Our 3 panelists today are Dr. Lynn Mohammed, founder of the Stream Labs, who will be presenting the Muslim perspective. The Christian perspective will be presented by Reverend Dr. Norval Brown, pastor, Cary United Methodist Church, and presenting the Jewish perspective will be Judy Levy, Executive Director of the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs. I would now like to introduce the Christian co-chair of SWIFT, Leslie Carey, who will be moderating the discussion. Thank you.
I'm going to kind of mix this up with the questions. Some of these are for all 3 of you, and some of these are individuals. So I'm going to start with an all 3 of you. So, and I'm going to start with Reverend Norval, and then we'll go to Dr. Lynn, and then we'll go to Judy. So the first question for all of you is, what is your best example of the difference between racial equality and racial equity?
Wow. Repeat that for me, please.
What is your best example of the difference between racial equality and racial equity?
And I'm not quite certain of what the questioner is actually, what they're getting at. Racial equity, racial equality.
I'd be happy to just take a stab at it if
Sure, thank you.
just
Sure.
think out loud, and maybe other people will have something to add.
This wasn't meant to stump anybody. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a stumper, I think, because we use like a lot of language interchangeably without being really specific about it. And I would say the notion of equity is one that has become so prominent, and we use it so much that I think sometimes like I forget like what exactly do we mean, when JCWA says racial equity. But I guess if I was just going to think out loud, and there's probably a more like a more like serious, yeah, I just think back to, like Brown versus Board of Education, and this notion that like you could be saying, oh, these things are equal, somehow they're equal, even though they happen in different places, like systems of education. What does equal mean, I guess, is what I would say. If you have high quality teachers and high quality teachers here, isn't that equal? When it's not, to me, that's not equity. I don't know even if this is true, factually true, but equity seems to me to be something that's like deeper and not just a notion of like, this is equal to that, or this family has this income and this family has the same income, therefore they're equal, even if they, faced like enormous challenges in order to get to where they are. And so I'm just like thinking out loud a little bit, and here I am rambling on a call with 70 people. So that's a little bit gutsy, but I'll just say, I have a feeling that equity is really what we're striving for.
Dr. Lynn, you want to chime in?
There we go. Yes, I did want to say something. So when those who are not studying Islam, al-Islam, when they look at the placement of a female, I'm just going to use this as an example, during our prayer, they may say, why are the females behind? Why are they behind a screen? Why are they behind, or some cases a screen, or why are they behind the men? Or in a different space or whatever. And when you learn more about what's going on, it becomes clear as to why. It's a safety issue. It's a situation where there's protection from possible harm. It's protecting those who may be nursing, who may be carrying a child. So there's a lot of positives that's in that situation. And they would say, well, a woman can't lead a man during prayer. Well, if the man is incapacitated, if it's a young person who doesn't know, or someone who can't do it mentally, then she can lead prayer. If there's no male present, she can. So equitably, we have rights, just like all the men have rights in our religion. However, when it comes to leadership, because we respect leadership, when it comes to leadership, we do, without saying that this is any less of a strike against, it's not a strike against us, it's not putting us into a lesser category, but we do recognize leadership. And so equally, we all have rights to be respected, and there's rights that we have in reference to property ownership and all of these things. We have rights, but we also recognize that there is a time when we are promoting leadership where those rights may look to the outsider to be drastically different, but it's not. It's a respect that we have that we're honoring.
Interesting. Thank you. Reverend Norville, this one's for you. Do you have any suggestions about how to talk to our children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews about racial competency?
And it depends. Okay, there are some things that about which I talk to my children and my grandchildren. I have books that I read to them. I have, because many of the, since 1998, I've been in cross-racial situations. My children have learned the value of maintaining our own culture, but also in learning other cultures. For instance, in one church that I served in Aurora, predominantly, in fact, my presence there made it predominantly white. We did a celebration of Kwanzaa, which is an African-American winter harvest festival. And so we talked about the principles of Kwanzaa, and that was a time of educating for my children as we looked at aspects of our culture, but it was also a time of education for members of that parish as they became exposed to other cultural traditions and the importance and the value of those traditions. And so I think one of the most important things is sharing the story, helping persons to see where they are in the story, and then moving to change the history of how those stories are meaningful to each other or why they're meaningful to each other. Yeah.
Good, excellent. Dr. Muhammad, when confronted with a racist comment, depending on the situation, this is my question, by the way. When confronted with a racist comment, depending on the situation, I usually ignore it. I know that's bad. Or sometimes I ask, why do you feel that way? Or why would you believe that? What are some other ways that I could talk to this person?
One of the things that, as I mentioned when I was speaking, that we understand the individuals that we're working with and that we're, in this case, communicating with. And one thing that I have seen individuals do is to represent the things that they have in common as opposed to what's different. And we're both afraid, we're both whatever it may be. And that helps to defuse part of that. I have seen individuals maybe, talking about something that's extremely generalized as opposed to identifying, whatever that situation was. And here's an example. There was an Abyssinian ruler, and one of the individuals who was working with Prophet Muhammad of 1400 years ago, he went to this community where the Abyssinian ruler was, and a person who was against the Muslims at that time ran to the king and said, these people are not following your way and blah, blah, blah. And the king allowed the person to speak, and he said, actually, we believe in Jesus, we believe in, and he started going down the list of things that were similar. And the Abyssinian king stood up, took his staff, drew a line in the sand, and said, the difference between them and I, and he's a Christian and these were Muslims, he said, the difference between what they believe and what I believe is as wide as this thin line right here. In other words, there were so many commonalities there. So to diffuse the situation is to approach it from a similar issue, and then at a different time, try to see if you can help that person get a better understanding of whatever it is causing them to have that racial statement, as opposed to just confronting them and wanting to knock their lights out.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Judy, does your faith community encourage members to participate in peaceful demonstrations against racism? And do they sponsor events? I think you touched a little bit on this, but I wanted to give you a little extra time.
Thanks, Leslie. We because of we use a community organizing model for our own work, which is, to work in partnership with other community-based groups and to put forth the voices of the people who are most impacted by the issues as leaders on the issues, and also to kind of motivate our own members to figure out how are they going to bring their networks and friends with them. So like we are in protests and actions sometimes, but mostly as a way to be strategic with respect to the issues that we're working on. I mean, so over the summer, it was big, obviously, because there were so many opportunities and people, whether you had been working on it or not, you felt pulled to show up. And it was, it was a very big moment for our organization. Actually, it was a big moment for fundraising because there were people who said, oh, where can I plug in? Where is there a vehicle for engagement that actually looks like action? And so we had kind of more people looking towards us than had in the past. But mostly absolutely peaceful protests, but protests are not like exactly our bread and butter. organizing is.
Okay, great, great. Reverend Norval, should racial competency training be mandated for law enforcement officers? And if so, what would the benefits be?
I think it absolutely should be mandated for law enforcement officials. And I think the benefits of racial competence training would be the different treatment of people. For instance, our youngest son will be 28 years, he'll be 29 years old in June. He has moved back here from California because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that the state of Illinois and the United States in general are opening up, he will feel more free to get into his car to travel. And each time he leaves the house, I will have to say to him, now, Gregory, you're going out. If the police stop you, this is what you do. And I'll have this long list. These are the things that my father told me I should do when I was 16, when I began driving. These are the things that I'm imagining my sons are going to have to tell their grandsons when they start driving. I do not know of one white person who has ever had to give that kind of instruction to their son. And why do I give that instruction to my son? Simply because I tell my son this, I finish my statements with this. I would much rather come to the courthouse and bail you out than go to the morgue and identify you. Racial competency training among law enforcement officials would mean that I could soon stop giving those instructions to my son, or perhaps my son will have to stop giving those instructions to his son. I think it's absolutely necessary, just as I think training in how to handle mental health issues is a necessity. I'm not convinced, and I mean, I have some African American friends who are law enforcement officers. I believe that all of them can use some mandatory training in issues regarding racial competency. And so, yes, I believe it's absolutely mandatory.
Dr. Lynn, do you want to add to that? You kind of look like you,
Yes,
you have
I
something
do.
to say.
I'm going to address this from two standpoints. One, as a parent, my youngest is similar to Dr. Brown. He's in his late 20s.
Your video's going, I mean, your audio's going out a little bit.
Okay, I'll talk up.
That's better.
Okay, thank you. My son, who's a little bit older, my youngest is the same age as his youngest, but my son, who is a little older, actually started a website that actually addresses this issue of police brutality and it's not just in Chicago, it's nationwide. My sister lives in London, Great Britain, near London. My brother lives in Spain. They're telling their spouses about racial problems because they don't see that every day. A Britainer can be any color and they can stand and walk and enjoy. In America, I have to be careful. My children had to be careful as they were growing up. Now we're talking to the grandchildren about this. So my son created this website called Visible Bully, and it's about awareness to the fact that this needs to be two things. It needs to be made aware that this is real, and that because we're in a city that has a lot of cronyism and other things of that nature, when a police officer is brought up on charges, you don't want to mess with, the law department doesn't want to mess with them because they're the ones who help to get the criminals off the street. So if you cross the police officers wrong, then you're going to have a big breakdown in the entire system. So they don't want to just lock people up, but at the same time, I agree with Dr. Brown, this is an issue that's not just even with non-minority police officers. This is an issue. My oldest son, not the one who did the website, another one, the one encounter that he had that was racially motivated, he was 12, he's in tears, backseat of the police car in handcuffs because he was an African-American child, telling them that the property that they claim he was vandalizing was his parents' property, that the stuff that he was doing was part of his own property. And it wasn't until his father became visible that they could actually see that my son was telling the truth. His father said, "Thank you for protecting our property. Do you think you owe my son an apology?" The person who was with the white shirt on, so he was the boss at that time in that space, he said he has no business owning anything like this. The one in the blue shirt, who was ranked underneath the person who spoke to my son, apologized to my son, took off the handcuffs, shook his hands, told him that he was sorry, that he didn't believe him up front. He was European American. So it's not just the racial difference with the police officers. There's an understanding that if you are of a particular group, that you are doing wrong. First, you're guilty until proven innocent instead of the other way around. So, we decided to attack it from the website and getting Congress to change the policies so that any racial discrimination, be it the police officer or anybody else, is considered to be a hate crime. And if it's made a hate crime, then the federal government gets involved, and now you take it out of Chicago's court system. One of my children is an attorney. She's working on trying to, deal with some of that stuff at the policy level, which includes different public offices that have this. So, and teaching them that they're not just victims because of their skin color. They are part of the solution because of how they've been taught. And that's what I think, that needs to happen, is that we see more of the solution part of this as opposed to just the victim part of this.
Excellent, excellent. Kind of adding on to that, Reverend Norville, do you believe that racial and cultural competency contributes to better race relations? And how?
Certainly. In fact, I'm thinking it is unfortunate that my thoughts immediately went to a musical group called the Dells. And the Dells sang a song entitled "A Little Understanding." Now, they were talking about a romantic relationship. But the line in the song that comes to me immediately with that question was, "A little understanding goes a mighty long way."
Yep.
Yes, a little understanding goes a mighty long way. And in terms of cultural competency, I have to work at understanding you just as you have to work at understanding me. Because when I understand you, I can value you even more. And when you understand me, you can value me even more. It moves us from just a surface relationship to a relationship that has greater depth to it. And as we were talking about the trees, we know that the deeper the roots can sink, the stronger that relationship can be. And so, yes, I think that understanding racial competency can help us to move. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Judy, did you want to add anything?
I actually was going to message you, Leslie, because I wanted to know if I could ask a question of our panelists, but I know that's really out of line. I don't mean to be too.
We'll do an audible, literally and figuratively. Go ahead.
So we're all, I mean, you all are just a little older than me, but not much. My kids are in their 20s, and you're, just listening to you, I mean, the grace in which you speak about these profoundly traumatic issues, it's like heart-wrenching, because, you're right. I don't worry about that with my kids, and it's so different and so unfair and honestly so wrong. And yet you're just like you're positive people in the universe, and you exude compassion yourselves. The younger folks, however, the 20-somethings, certainly many that work with us, are strident and have had it, and are much less measured in their notions of compassion and understanding. And I wanted to know if that's something that you might be willing to reflect on here, and how do you feel about that, and how are you calling those young folks in as well? I'll just say, Leslie, if that's not a direction that you want to move in, then
Nope,
we
you're
can
fine.
keep it
You're
short.
fine.
So one of the things I did with our summer camp this past summer, I told the children at the very beginning of the camp, you're going to be an agent of change. I had children from different ethnic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, different social economic backgrounds. Every child had to identify an issue, and they were seen as an agent of change. They're coming off of the first 4 months of being isolated from their peers. Their social emotional status was in the toilet. There was a lot of stuff going on with escalating crime in the city, crime against humanity, crimes against criminals out there doing all kind of garbage. They were afraid. They were nervous. There was a lot of tension that was going on in our camp. And I said to the children, what can you do? Letting them see this from a totally different lens. Like I said, you're not just on the victim side of this. You can actually do something. And at the end of it, they all found something positive that they could do. And every one of them had to connect that back to humanity. When the Muslim Student Association and some of the schools where I've worked, when they're engaged in activities, we ask them, what can you do? Islamophobia is out there. And so this is not a racial thing. This is more of an ethnic thing. And Islamophobia is out there. So if we want to break this, we have to let people know who we are. And that awareness, the Dell's reference, I really love that. Letting people see and know who you are helps to remove a lot of those fears, because that's a whole lot of what it is, a lot of those misunderstandings and misconceptions. That whole issue with the Congress at the change of the guard in Washington, there's an element of our culture that we have not heard from. That's how Trump got into office in the first place. He struck a chord with them. We can't just push them back under the rug. These are some issues that need to be dealt with. That is a time bomb that is festering, that is gangrene, that is hidden inside of a body that is growing. And if we don't address these issues that they have, whatever they may be, and I'm not sure we even totally understand what's going on there, but if we don't find out and address it, this can come back. And it could be even worse than it was before, because they had a voice and then it got stifled, and now they're angrier. And I think we need to be aware that there is not one facet of humanity that we can ignore. Everybody has an issue that needs to be addressed. Some of us are a little bit more vocal, and we get the squeaky wheel, we get our issues addressed. But we have to make sure that we let the children know, number one, you have a voice, and your issues we do want to hear. Number two, you can be an agent of change, which kind of takes some of the pressure off of them feeling like a victim all of the time.
Before I answer that question, because I may not get a chance to do this, I want to say how much I have appreciated Dr. Muhammad and Ms. Levy today and hearing your presentations. But you have touched a nerve with that question, in that, well, you've gone someplace that you probably don't want to go. And the reason being is you've invited me to share this morning's sermon with you. And time will, and you're probably very, very glad that time is not going to permit me to do a reprise of this morning's sermon. But here we go. this morning, we talked about a mission statement for your life. Jesus, standing before Pilate, said, "For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world." And John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, writes a mission statement, not just for his Methodist followers, but I think that becomes a universal statement, a universal mission for all of us. And this is what John Wesley says: "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, for as long as ever you can." And indeed, our children need to understand that they too have a mission, and to grow into that mission to be agents of change. When I baptize a baby, I'm very, very clear to my congregation that there is nothing in this child's genetic makeup that's going to make him or her a misogynist or racist, a xenophobe, or anything else. All of that is learned behavior. And I see Dr. Muhammad, a biology teacher, nodding her head, so I know I'm on firm ground here. That's all learned behavior. Why does that, and so why do those things still exist? Because somebody's still teaching them. And trust me, they are not teaching them that stuff in some back alley, in some back room. But that's a conversation that's unfolding at the place, at parties. That's a conversation that's unfolding by the water cooler. And our children are not only hearing it, but because children learn what they live and live what they learn, that's what they're doing. And so we have to change, we have to change the dynamic. We have to change the narrative. So when I say to my congregation, there's nothing that's going that in this child's genetic makeup that's going to make him or her any of these things. What you're saying to that child is, now you may see those things out in the world, but you're not going to learn those things here in this place. You're going to learn an alternative narrative. And hopefully our teaching of that alternative narrative will be stronger than what they learn in the world.
And kind of speaking with that alternative narrative, how can religious leaders or community leaders really make sure that kind of an attitude, that kind of a space, that kind of a aura becomes a permanent space, a permanent way of thinking, and really making sure that that line is walked in a very, very narrow way. Usually you don't want to walk in a narrow way, but I think in this particular instance, you want to stay on that path with not a whole lot of deviation. How can leaders and parents make sure that that path stays narrow?
Modeling. And I'm saying this from an educator standpoint, modeling. The younger children, they're looking at their parents as a role model. They're looking at the clergy. They're looking at the individuals that are in their religious institutions as role models. And they want to emulate. The role models are showing how they navigate through challenges, how they accomplish tasks. What happens when there's a little snafu? How do you handle it? Because they're real. This is what they're going to see. So to provide for them the modeling, let them shadow, let them be mentored by the persons around them. And Judy Libby's, your organization is a perfect example of that. So giving them a chance to experience, the little ones, giving them a chance to experience things by watching others do it for them. The older ones, they need to be engaged in it, not just watching. They need to be doing it. So that thin line, part of it is someone structuring it for them, and then part of it is them structuring it too. Part of it is them having that dialogue to say, this is what we see and this is what we need and we'd like to fix this. Part of it is someone saying, this is what we're going to do today. All of that becomes part of that narrow line. And it's giving them life-sustaining support. So when they go off to college, leave the nest, leave the comfort of the hive, they are equipped with tools to be able to do that. And all of us have, represented that we've been part of our religion since we were birthed, probably, I don't know. So we have that legacy there. Some children don't have that legacy. And so for those children, it's bringing them on board and letting them see that this is not just Sunday. This is not just Friday night, Saturday night. This is every day. This is part of the practice of what, and for us it's Friday afternoon. This is part of what we do, so it's all about living, not seclusion, but engaging in the world, but not becoming the world. We're there, but we're not being weakened by the world.
We're in the world, but not of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Judy, do you have anything that you'd like to add as a community-based person?
I don't want Reverend Brown to lose his thought, so can I go after him?
Oh, well.
He's ready.
He's ready. We can change up.
Okay. One of the benefits, or one of the benefits for me is interreligious dialogue, which is why I am so excited about SWIFT and wish I had known about it when I was there in the South suburbs. Two things that come to my mind in terms of interfaith, interreligious dialogue. The first is one of my most favorite authors is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who, when he marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, said, "I felt as if I were praying with my feet," and then wrote a wonderful, wonderful poem that talked about no religion is an island, which I have used in so many settings, not just interreligious settings, but I've actually used it here in my church to remind my congregation that as Christians, we do not have the market on spirituality cornered. We just got a piece of the pie. The second thing that strikes me is I have a very, very dear friend, African-American rabbi. And as Passover is beginning this coming Saturday, I am reminded that for 10 years, I participated in a Seder with him entitled "The Cup is for All." Now put your seatbelts on when I tell you about this Seder, because this Seder took the children of Israel experience in Egypt, laid it alongside of Africans in the south of the United States, their experience, and laid those experiences side by side. Gathered around that table were Jews that were American of African descent, Jews of European descent, there were Christians, and there were Muslims gathered around that table. That, I believe, is an invaluable picture to be presented to the world, to be presented to our children. Because our children, we've got a lot of our children who are scratching their heads wondering, what is the value of this organized religion if you're constantly talking about transformation and change and nothing happens. But if we can continue to do more and more interreligious dialogue and interaction, and to do it in those places, in those settings where it is visible, I believe that we can be, in the words of Robert Louis Stevenson, who was watching a lamplighter light the lamps, the gas lamps around his house. He said, "I see a man who is punching holes in the darkness." I believe our interfaith dialogue can punch holes in the darkness.
I love that line. I'm writing it down.
You brought us from the Dells to Robert Louis Stevenson to Abraham Joshua Heschel. That's pretty impressive, Reverend. I just had a couple of thoughts to add to this piece, and that is that it's on us to push for the courageous conversations that need to take place between people, so that we can all move along this journey together. And, I'm like, my organization is a small organization. We have 13 employees, staff members, but because of my positionality, I have to be the one out front saying, this is hurtful. Let's talk about it, and we need to hold each other accountable and ask other people to hold us accountable too, so that it doesn't have to be comfortable, but it has to be, acceptable to have these hard conversations. Sorry about that. And help people to understand, what's wrong, because, there's a whole body of work now, the, movies and books and, the Brian Stevenson's work and 13th, and, there's just no ignoring how completely inequitable we are as a country. And so I believe these are the conversations that we must be having, with everyone we know. And then I just want to add, my organization has done a lot of work on the police accountability issue, which is, when you look at the data, hundreds of millions of dollars spent on the, settlements for the excessive police force of the Chicago Police Department. And because our organization is explicitly, reaching out to Jewish people of color, we're a much stronger and more credible partner in the work, because we have people who have more people who have directly experienced, the terrible, situation with, untrained, dare I say, not as competent as they ought to be, people from the Chicago Police Department. And so all of it makes us better when we, embrace each other in the work.
And again, I want to do the three of you, because I think that, you've each got some really important but different stuff to share. And I'll go with Dr. Lynn first. What resources can you recommend to educate our audience, our participants, on racial competency, other than theaters like this? Do you have any other resources that you would recommend for our participants?
For those who are still working and not retired, or those who are retired but still have a connection with their places of employment, one of the things I'm encouraging is for there to be a dialogue about how the company deals with racial diversity and or the inadequacies that may be happening. That's one. Definitely this issue with law enforcement and city workers in general. It's not just the law enforcement people. There are lots of biases that exist in the public school system. And working for some universities, it's actually there too. So to actually have these hardcore conversations from management down that deals with how things are being dealt with. To utilize, Dr. Brown mentioned this earlier, recognizing the social emotional side of this piece. And there's a lot of, one of my students did a research study on sleep and the need for sleep. And it was actually trying to justify why he could stay up all night and play video games, but it caused him to look at why teenagers need sleep. And so he found out that a child who doesn't get enough sleep actually has brain lesions, similar to what you would see in a person coming back from the front line. So post-traumatic stress syndrome. But he also connected it to neighborhood children in these large cities who are exposed to a lot of different things. And mortality is one of them, and how their brains also are showing some similar lesions. So that social emotional piece, and our religious organizations can help with that to a point. Having actual counselors and people available to help navigate through that. You asked an excellent question, Leslie. How does a person deal with a situation when they've been confronted with someone who's been unfair to them, gone against humanity, in my opinion? These are things that we used to in the days of slavery, not me, but those who were in that life. They used to toughen up the youth and read them. They would give them these statements about your mother's not, and you're this and that, and just making them get angry. And then when the child reached their breaking point, they would say, this is what you can't do if you're with Massa. Massa's gonna say all of this stuff and do all of this stuff to you. So there was a different level of seasoning that was going on. And we still do it today as a joking thing, but it still hurts. And so to actually show children not that route for getting their issues addressed, but giving them a different route that others don't have to experience, to give them a more balanced approach to this. So some resources would be that social emotional piece for sure. Having those sensitivity things happening in places of employment. One company, they actually made a statement during last year's, when we were having our summer problems and whatnot, and companies were becoming more and more aware of the need to be more racially diverse. This company says, we never thought of it that way. These are the CEOs representing, the company. We had never even looked at that, how many minorities are not represented in management, upper level management. So I think those two pieces would be really, really critical.
Excellent. Reverend Norville, do you have any thoughts to add for resources?
Yes, I do, but I'm going to defer to Judy so that
okay, the two of you are playing this game. All right,
it's payback time. My answer will be brief. I would like to address my answer to my fellow white folks in the Zoom room, because it's not the role of Black people to train us and make us un-racist. It is our work to do. And because of that, we need to get educated, and we need to open ourselves up to webinars and trainings and opportunities so that we truly understand why diversity makes us stronger. And we also, I believe, have to really embrace humility, because I just can't tell you how many people I've spoken to who said, oh, I read that book, White Fragility, that book, that book. And what I would like to say is, there are going to be some things that resonate with you and some things that don't, but it's up to us to understand and open our hearts and glean what we can so that we can do this work together. So that would be my advice. And I have a whole, if you want to send it out later, I do have a whole racial justice reading list that might be of interest somebody would be interested.
Excellent. Excellent.
Whether it is Allah, Yahweh, or God, they are directing these moments. Because Judy, you touched on where I wanted to go. You're right. I should not have to educate white people. White people need to understand what white privilege is. I have a friend who said she walked into a room and she knew immediately that she was going to make a good impression because she was blonde and blue-eyed. And I know that when I walk into a room, I am going to be looked at suspiciously. I've seen it, I've experienced it. To my amazement, to my joy, when I came to this church in Cary, I had a member to come to me and ask me if it would be all right if she facilitated a book discussion on the book White Fragility. And my question was, what are you expecting from me? Excuse me. Because I do not want to sit in a class and feel as if I'm being put under a microscope. And she says, no, you don't have to come if you don't want. Okay. But she led a course on the book White Fragility. And next on their reading list is The Color of Laws. And so that question leads me to resources that I have. And so The Color of Laws, White Fragility, Racism, America's Original Sin, and the book Raising White Kids, Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America are just 4 of the resources that I have available to me. The United Methodist Church has an organization, it's General Commission on Religion and Race, which has some wonderful, wonderful reading material, videos, and other statements that are excellent in helping to break down the racial divide that is here in the United States. I had the joy last year in November. The daughter of one of our members lives in Kenosha, and she had participated in some of the demonstrations that unfolded there last summer. And she came back and delivered the sermon on a Sunday morning. She said things that I could say, and if I were to say them, they would be summarily dismissed because it's just seen as just another Black face, Black voice. But when she spoke, they thought, she went to our Sunday school. She was confirmed here. She helped lead worship here. This is one of ours. And that voice had power. It had power. And what needs to happen is white people who understand what white privilege is and can talk about how they have benefited from it and how all white people benefit from privilege, even though there would be a great many of them who would say, I don't have any privilege. Yes, you do. And when people become aware of white privilege and the advantages that it has brought to them, and then have that aha experience, this is wrong. this is wrong. Then, when they speak, there is power in their witness, there's power in their narrative that does not go in one ear and out the other, but it goes in one ear and takes a turn south and moves 18 inches into the heart. And there it begins to affect change in us all.
Dr. Lynn, did you want to add a little bit to that? We're running a little short on time,
Right. I just
but I
wanted,
want to capture what you wanted to sum up.
I wanted to make a reference to the fact that when these dialogues.
Your microphone, I need.
Okay. When these dialogues do occur, with whatever form they're in, I'm also encouraging all who can hear my voice not to patronize, not to do it in a superficial way, but to make sure that individuals are recognizing this is a need that needs to, it's something that needs to change. It needs to change. And not just, this is our checklist. We've just checked this off that we did this. This is something that's a little deeper than that.
Thank you. It is 5:01. It is so sad that this is over, but for my closing remarks, I just wanted to say, mind blown. I am just so grateful that this afternoon happened. We at SWIFT, I just want to thank so much our wonderful, wonderful panelists today for their expertise in this very delicate subject. We are forever grateful. We also want to thank all of our participants who opted for a Zoom meeting rather than a sunshiny afternoon or to participate in March Madness. We appreciate that. This program has been recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, and there will be a link to that channel on our website as well as on our Facebook page. And please look for our next forum that's scheduled currently for June 27th. You can visit our website at info@swiftinterfaith.org or find us on Facebook or on our website, or find us on Facebook. Please enjoy the rest of your day and may God bless all of us. Thank you so much.